Today is October 31st, Samhain. Samhain is the first day of winter. I have friends who talk about the seasonal signs. They say that there's the seasonal, the calendrical. The calendrical sign of the change of the seasons would be it's October 31st. This is the day of Samhain. The seasonal sign is that, well, most of this week it's been cold and snowy. It snowed for 3 days straight, Sunday through Tuesday. It looks more like December outside than it does the end of October. These are things that, as a witch, you recognize, you observe, you notice. Now, it may not be white and snowy outside where you are, but if you look, you'll notice that there are changes. You'll notice the changes of the season. Why do we celebrate? Why do we celebrate this change of the season? Why do we celebrate? And why do I say it's winter? I say it's winter because when you look at how events line up in the calendar, Yule and Midsummer are solstices. They're the longest and the shortest day, the longest and the shortest night. And while the calendar says that they're the beginning of summer and the beginning of winter, if you think about it, they're really the peak. Winter solstice is the peak of winter. Yule is the peak of winter. Once you've reached Yule, you've gone halfway through the winter. It's been cold and snowy for months, and now you're looking forward to spring. Same with the equinoxes. They are the peak of spring and fall. And if that's the case, if Yule is the peak of winter, then winter must start earlier than Yule. Well, Samhain comes just before Yule. And so therefore, Samhain is the beginning of winter, and Imbolc is the end of winter, the beginning of spring. Many places it doesn't seem that way. Certainly where I live in Colorado, it doesn't seem that way. We tend to see the changes come much later. But if you're observant, if you look, if you take time, you will see the changes. You'll recognize. You'll feel the crisp snap of the air in the morning. This is what a witch does. A witch observes. A witch notices. This is part of why people think we are wise. We have the wisdom of experience. We've lived long enough and experienced enough life to be able to look at things and say, this is how, so for example, I have neighbors who just moved in across the street. They're from New York. It snows a lot in New York, and they were commenting on how much snow there was on the ground. And I said, this is unusual. This looks more like the middle of December than it does October, which tells me that we're probably going to have a better than average season for snow. Now, we had one of those last year, certainly up in the mountains. We went into winter last year deep in drought, and we came out of winter no longer in drought. During this fall, we have been drier than average. If we get the snow that I am expecting, based on what I've seen at this point, we won't have to worry about drought for another year or two. This is that wisdom that people talk about, the wisdom of witches. It's simply, I've lived here my entire life. I'm familiar with the cycles. And so when I see something like this, I look at it and say, yep, this is how things will probably be. So what about Samhain? Well, beginning of winter. If you haven't, if you are an agrarian society and you haven't brought in your harvest, all of your harvest by now, you're not going to. This is the beginning of the time where you are allowed to rest and plan for next spring's planting. You may or may not have the ability to spend time repairing tools for next spring right now. Probably more likely you do now than you will at Yule. And again, you'll have more time closer to Imbolc. But now is the time to start planning for what you wish to grow and harvest next year. It's the beginning of the season of death. We see this all around us. The trees are losing their leaves, if they haven't already. The grass has gone dormant and brown. If you live anywhere that isn't extremely hot, this is what's going on. So 3/4 of America certainly are this way. Britain is this way. And so it's the season of death, because all around you the world seems to be dying. Now, most people have a problem with death. They don't like discussing death. They don't like thinking about death. Well, having finally reached that point where I can admit to myself and others that I am now middle-aged, I can tell you for a fact that there comes a time when you start to look at death. You start to recognize that it is coming. I expect that I will avoid death for another half century. But I recognize that I have lived more than a half century, and therefore I am probably closer to death than I am to my birth. And therefore it behooves me to think about what do I want for my death? What do I want others to do when that time comes? What do I expect? What do I hope for? Because death comes to all of us. No one gets out alive. It is human nature to procrastinate. It is human nature to put off until tomorrow what you should be doing today. But at this time of the year, our ancestors, because they faced death every year, especially during the winter, but also during childbirth and other times, disease and other factors caused them to face death nearly every day. And so they had no choice but to recognize and look at death. Today in our modern world, there are adults, those who are 18 or older, who have never faced the loss of someone near to them. They've never been to a funeral. That has only happened since maybe the 1950s, the last 60, 70 years. It is a new phenomenon. When my dad, who's in his 80s, was a child, summer was a time of concern because of polio. People died of polio every summer. Death was much easier. We have claimed some of the dominion over death, and so we don't think about death. We don't talk about death. Death is scary. Death is an unknown. Death is something to be avoided at all costs. Certainly, if you don't have any spiritual tendencies, if you're an atheist, This is the only life you've got. This is it. You're going to cling to this no matter how bad things may get. It doesn't matter if you become it doesn't matter if you're starved of oxygen, if your brain is starved of oxygen and you end up a vegetable. If you're an atheist, you're probably thinking to yourself, I want those doctors to do everything they possibly can to keep me alive. It doesn't matter that I'm a vegetable. But if you have a spiritual life, if you understand that death is simply a transition, a doorway, a passage into something different, now you start to look at death as not so frightening, not so horrible, and you start to realize that quality of life is more important than simply retaining life. If I can't, if I find myself in a situation where I can't enjoy my life, where I can't sit in front of my computer and play video games or watch TV or go for a walk with someone special or just even have a talk with someone special. If I can't, maybe not to the full extent that I always have been able to, but if I can't at least do some of these things, if I'm going to be relegated to a bed where I'm drooling all over myself and need someone to feed me or need to be fed through tubes, that's not a life I want. And that's not a life that's not a life I think anyone would want or hope for. This is what I mean about thinking about death. It's not so much, I don't fear death, I'm ready for it, let's go. It is, I don't fear death, and therefore, when it happens, when it comes for me, I may not be ready, but I will not run. There's no reason. There's no point. And I firmly believe that everyone chooses whether or not to die. No matter how bad their wounds, how serious an illness, I think that when death comes, it gives you a choice. Do you wish to continue as you are, however that may be, or continue with what will be based on what brought you to the brink of death? Or will you choose to accept her embrace and move on to the next phase of life? After all, death is a part of life. Birth, life, death, rebirth. These are the things we as witches believe in. Because our ancestors dealt with death in a much more regular basis, and they saw death take the world every year, overcome the world every year, it only made sense that they would come to recognize and honor the place that death has in their lives. And so at this time of year, this change of the seasons, they looked at those they had lost during the year, during the prior year, and they set places for them at the table. They went to visit them at their grave sites. They had conversations with those that they have missed for the past year, or even longer. They treated their dead as simply gone away. I mean, let's face it, funerals are for the living, not the dead. The dead don't care. And as coarse and harsh as that sounds, it's the truth. When you leave this life, when your spirit, when that spark of life leaves your body, how do you plan to participate in that celebration of your life? You're not. Everyone else is going to celebrate your life. Hopefully everyone in your life will celebrate your life and the joy and the wisdom and all of the benefits that you brought to their lives with yours. This is what celebrating death is about, is understanding that it's inevitable, but also recognizing and honoring all the things that you do before your time comes, and recognizing that you must do things worth honoring before your time comes. Don't allow death to find you with regrets. Don't put off until tomorrow what you could be doing today. I know that when I was in my 40s, my entire family took a Mediterranean cruise for 3 weeks. We spent a lot of time around Italy, where my ancestors come from. In Greece, I went to see the Parthenon. I went to see a lot of ancient sites. I went to see the Vatican, of all places. Yes, a witch in the Vatican. You would be amazed at all of the pagan statuary from Rome and Greece that they have in that building, in that place. But the thing that I came away with that most changed my attitude was seeing my dad, who at the time was in his 70s. I was in my 40s, he was in his 70s. We were at sea level in Europe. Now, he and I both are natives of Colorado. We grew up here, at high altitude in the mountains. And he was struggling because of the heat and the humidity. And I wasn't, because I'm 30 years younger than he is. I was able to climb to the top of Mount Vesuvius. He wouldn't have been able to attempt it. And it occurred to me that had I waited until I retired, until I had the money, all these excuses that people come up with for not doing the things that they really want to, had I waited, I would not have enjoyed the trip nearly as much as I did. If I had waited until all of the things that I said should be in place came into place, I would never have done any of this. You don't do things when everything is perfect. If you have a vacation, a dream vacation that you want to go on, don't say I'll do it when I retire and I have time. Don't say I'll do it when I have the money and can afford to. Instead, say, how can I do this next year, this year? How can I do this as soon as possible? You will be a much happier person doing the things that you have a passion to do now, while you can still enjoy it. And when death does find you, you won't have any regrets, because you will have done everything you had set your mind to do. The people who die with regrets are those who never do the things that they really wanted to do. I choose not to have regrets. I choose to do the things I really, truly want to do, and do them in a timely manner so that I can enjoy doing them. It's not enough to just say I've done them. I must do them in a way and a time that I can enjoy doing them. In this case, for this example, it's traveling around Europe. It's seeing the ancient sites of the Romans and the Greeks, the Hellenists, climbing to the top of the Parthenon and visiting the Temple of Athena, and seeing that it's not just the Temple of Athena. There are 3 temples there. Everyone knows about the Parthenon. What they don't know is the tiny little temple glommed onto the side, the Temple of Nike. And then across the plateau is the Temple of Poseidon. Only when you go there and you see these things do you realize and recognize what you've missed, what you have not experienced. On that same trip, my brother and I stopped in Firenze, which is only the English speakers call Florence. And we went to the museum where we saw Michelangelo's David. It's a statue that everybody has seen. Everybody's familiar. When I say the statue of David, you know exactly which statue I'm talking about. Yet when I saw it in person, up close, I finally understood why the pose. Why is he standing in that particular pose? Well, he's holding up one end of the sling that he used to slay Goliath. It now makes sense. These are the things that you can only really understand when you experience them personally. So experience life personally. Don't let work, don't let family, don't let friends, don't let others decide for you what you will or won't do this year. Decide for yourself, because that also is something a witch does. A witch decides for themselves what is true, what is correct, and what they will do. This is what marks a witch as a witch. So I encourage you to not let life pass you by. Use this Samhain, use every Samhain, as a reminder of the things that you've wanted to do but have not yet done. Use it and recognize that if you haven't done the things you want to, yet another year has gone by. You are older, and at a certain point, every year that goes by, you will become less able. You will become more fragile. You will have less energy. You might have more money. You might have more time. But you will be less able to do the things that cause you to want to go and do these things in the first place. Just marking things off the bucket list isn't enough. Enjoying the experience of marking things off your bucket list is what life is about. So if you haven't made that list, make it now and detail it. Don't just say, I want to go skydiving. Explain why you want to go skydiving. Do the things as you want to do them, and do them while you still can do them the way you want to do them. And then you will have no regrets. And when death does finally come for you, you also will be ready for her. Blessed be.